Division design is a huge part of Hoi4. How you design your divisions can really make or break your playthroughs. And ever since the game came out, people have been arguing about the best template. Some of you may use simple special forces, while others rely on space marines. And even the official Hoi4 account dropped a short showing off the so-called
21 width divisions.
All of this got me thinking, what actually is the best template? Not just good or popular, I mean the actual best. Something you can prove with math. With this goal in mind, I sat down in order to do some research and pretty much ran into a wall right away. What does best even mean? Is it a template that beats every other template? The most cost efficient one? Or maybe the one that can keep on going, beating division after division? I couldn't really decide. It felt like none of these alone would give me the result I wanted. A division that beats everything else would probably be a big tank template that's way too overpriced for what it does. And even then it would most likely disintegrate the moment it touched mountains. On the other hand, picking the most cost efficient template could lead to a static front line where you don't have enough firepower to break through your enemy's defenses. With the first hurdle taken, I could start my real research, and here's what I found. Finding the best template out of all possible templates is per definition an optimization problem. In this case, it's about finding the template with the highest combat ability. There are tons of ways to solve an optimization problem, but most of them are insanely complicated or just straight up impossible for me to do. I really needed something simple to understand and manageable to do. And during my research I found two methods that more or less fit these criteria. So let me introduce to you the power of weights. Using them is pretty straightforward. Imagine you're the coach of a sports team and you've got a position to fill. You look at the stats of a few different players and depending on what's important for your position, you give each stat a different weight. Combine these weights with the player and you get a score. The guy with the highest score then is best fit for the role. Now let's bring this back to our problem. Do you know what decides how well a division does in combat? It's their stats. With this in mind, I came up with a simple 3-step plan to find the best template. Step 1. Figure out which stats are the most important and assign them weights. Step 2. Use that to rank every battalion in the game. Step 3. Build the best division using the best battalions. So that we don't lose track, I will blend in which step we are at in the top right. If you've been paying attention, you might have already noticed the problem. How do we determine the weights? I can't just weight the stats by gut feeling. That would kind of ruin the whole point and definitely isn't very mathematical. Instead, I needed something solid, and that's when I came across the second method, the genetic algorithm. But first, let's take a step back. What even is an algorithm? Think of it like a cooking recipe. Just a set of step-by-step instructions to reach a goal. But as you know, we need a genetic algorithm. It actually comes straight from biology, because genetic algorithms are based on how evolution works in nature. The core idea of evolution is pretty simple. Living things don't stay the same forever. Over generations, they adapt more and more to their environment. This happens because of 3 key factors. To make it easy, let's look at an example. Imagine a bunch of giraffes living out in the savannah. Each giraffe is slightly different because of genetics. Some have longer legs, some have longer necks. This is the first key factor of evolution, variation. Those different traits really matter. Giraffes with longer necks and longer legs can reach higher foliage, giving them an advantage in accessing food. These individuals are also better at spotting and avoiding predators. They survive more often and therefore can also pass on their traits more often. That's the second factor, selection. The third factor is inheritance. Traits get passed on from parents to kids. During this, traits get mixed and shuffled. If one parent has a long neck and the other has long legs, a baby might get both of these traits. Of course, it could also get short versions of both. But in that case, nature usually takes care of it. Over time, this feedback loop keeps pushing successful traits further and further. That's why giraffes' necks gradually became longer and longer until they ended up the way we know them today. And here's the cool part. With a little bit of coding, you can use this exact concept to evolve solutions to a problem. A genetic algorithm always follows the same basic idea. First, you generate a bunch of random possible solutions, each slightly different, just like the giraffes. These are your individuals. Because they are different, some will naturally perform better than others. That's the selection part. If you can figure out which are best at solving your problem, you can just take those, mix them together and repeat. Do this over and over, and your solutions, or in my case divisions, keep evolving, gradually getting better at solving the problem. Now that you know how a genetic algorithm works, let's finally talk about how I used it to find out which stats are the most important. First, I had to find a way to represent a division. This part is actually not that complicated. When you open a template in-game, you see a bunch of stats, but only a few are actually used in combat. So I just grabbed those few stats and put them in an array. This way, one array represents one division. Then I simply added a pool of total points that randomly distribute the stats for each division. This way, I could generate as many different individuals as I wanted. The actual tricky part is evaluating these divisions. This is the most critical part of a genetic algorithm and called the fitness function. And honestly, I didn't see any way around it. I had to simulate battles against other divisions. But that meant I needed opponents. So I played as a tiny country in South America, and every time a new war broke out, I made a save. Later, I went through all of these saves and picked the best divisions the AI was using. That became my testing pool. And here's the crucial part. What I'm asking the algorithm basically is, find me the optimal division for beating this list of opponents. And because this list comes from single player, the result will be the best division in single player. Does this mean it wouldn't work in multiplayer? Well, it depends. In single player, soft attack is king. That's because how effective it is depends on enemy hardness. Since the AI almost never goes above 50% hardness, there's literally no point in using heart attack. So the algorithm just ignores it. That can be fine in random lobbies, but experienced players often use tanks with high hardness. And I don't think I have to explain how this would go. But back to the fitness function. Even with my list of test divisions ready, there was still one big problem. I had to recreate Hoi4's combat system as accurately as possible. The simulation wasn't accurate, the genetic algorithm wouldn't be able to evaluate correctly, and the whole thing would fall apart. So I think it's time to talk about the combat system. When a battle starts, the first thing the game does is checking the combat width. This depends on the terrain and how many directions you are attacking from. Each side fills that width with divisions until it's maxed out. If it's not full, you can still squeeze in one extra division, but only if the total width doesn't go over the limit by more than 33%. If one side exceeds the limit, all their active divisions receive the difference as a penalty to their stats. Any extra divisions land in the reserves. Since my combat simulator only compares two templates, it first randomizes a terrain and then fills each side with how many templates can fit. The terrain chances are loosely related to how often each one appears in the game. With both sides ready, they attack each other. While they do so, they drain each other's organization. Organization in this case represents their combat readiness. If it reaches 0, the division has to retreat. The attackers go first. Each division has something called engagement width, which is double its combat width. So a 30 width division can engage up to 60 width of enemy divisions. If no enemy divisions fit, one is picked randomly. Then comes the targeting. Each division makes one coordinated attack, where around about 35% of its attack value is focused on a single target, while the rest is spread out across all enemies in its engagement width. Organization damage depends on a mix of stats. First, soft attack and hard attack get split based on the defender's hardness. So if the enemy has 40% hardness, 40% of your hard attack and 60% of your soft attack get used. But in this case, it's 0% hardness. Then, probably because of performance reasons, the game divides that number by 10. That's how many individual attacks you actually roll. The defender's defense is also divided by 10. That's how many attacks they can block. Every attack has a 10% chance to succeed. If it lands, the game rolls a dice between 1 and 4. That's how much orc damage you do. But here's the important part. Once the defender's defense runs out, the hit chance jumps to 40%. This is called critting and basically increases your damage 4 times. After all of the attackers finish, the defenders use the same calculation to do their damage. But instead of the defense stat, the attackers use their breakthrough stat to block incoming attacks. That's also why divisions with very low breakthrough are so bad at attacking. They get crit almost instantly. We still got 2 more stats, armor and piercing. These are just compared to each other. If a division is not pierced, it takes reduced damage. Either 80, 65 or 50%, depending on how much more armor it got. I'm pretty sure these modifiers are applied after all the attacks are used up. That's also how I implemented it. But there's another more hidden aspect to it. If you're not pierced, the dice size during your own attacks is increased to 6, effectively increasing the damage you do by 40%. Now you know how the combat system works and how I recreated it. Truthfully, there's one thing I left out of my simulation on purpose, and that is strength. While organization represents combat readiness, strength is a division's true health. If it hits 0, your division gets deleted. During battle, it's handled the same way as organization. Every time the orc damage dice is rolled, it also rolls a strength damage dice with the size of 2. Here's the thing though, under normal circumstances, strength doesn't matter much. It's just a flat modifier that reduces attack based on how much strength is left. If the strength ranges from slightly below 100% to 90%, the division's attack is multiplied by 0.9. As long as you don't use force attack, desperate defense, lack anything or have terrible supply, strength does not go below 90%. That's why I didn't have to think about it much. Now, for the last part, I want to show you that the simulation is accurate. To do that, we can just start a battle in-game, take the division stats and put them into the simulator. It doesn't just have to pick the correct winner. It also needs to get close on 2 other things. How much organization the winner has left and how long the battle lasts. The in-game battle results look like this. The attacking side won. They had 25 and 27 organization left, and the whole fight lasted 41 hours. Since there's always some randomness involved, it's never going to match perfectly, but it should get close. So let's see. I'd say that's pretty accurate. The only difference is the battle length, but that actually makes sense, because in the simulation I used the stats from the very start. In-game, those stats can go down over time, so naturally the battle took longer there. The winner, the battle length and the organization left are the key factors during evaluation. Here's how it works. The algorithm makes each individual fight 1 offensive and 1 defensive battle against every division in the testing pool. It then tracks the win rate as the main measure for performance. But let's be honest here, the AI's templates aren't exactly great. That means a lot of divisions end up with a 100% win rate, even if they are not that impressive. So I needed another way to tell them apart once they all hit 100%. And that's where battle length and organization come in. Both of these act as modifiers. They start at 1, and if a division wins, they are increased. The more organization is left, the higher the orc modifier. And the faster the battle was won, the higher the time modifier. At the end, the win rate just gets multiplied by those modifiers for the final score. From there, you simply take the divisions with the highest score, mix and repeat. After a few hundred generations, you end up with the optimal division. But I'm sure some of you still have a question in mind. What about combat width? And here's the problem. You can't optimize for width, because if 2 divisions have the exact same stats, the smaller one will always be better. You can just fit more of them in a battle. So I had to lock in the combat width before even starting the algorithm. Luckily, we already have data on optimal width. Normally, you'd run something like a 16 width infantry division to just hold the line and a big 35-36 width division for pushing. But here, I needed 1 division to handle everything. Therefore, I went with 30 width for the big division, since mountains and marshes can still fit 2 of those. For the smaller one, I picked 18 width. Even though 15 is technically more efficient, it's not possible with every battalion type. And if you're wondering why 10 width aren't the best, it's because once you have more than 5 divisions in combat, they all start taking stacking penalties. Now, I could run the algorithm for both 18 and 30 width using a few realistic budgets, while compiling a list of the best performing divisions for each setup. There were some small differences between width and budgets, but overall the results were pretty similar. In single player, you generally fight infantry the most, and even late game tanks rarely go over 50% hardness. That's why hard attack is completely useless. None of the optimal divisions had any hard attack at all. The next part is pretty interesting too. Defense and breakthrough were ignored as well. Now, they're not useless. You know that both stats help block enemy attacks and prevent getting crit, but the algorithm clearly saw them as bad investments. Thing is, AI divisions not only lack hardness, but hard attack as well. Because of this, hardness becomes a better version of both defense and breakthrough. But even without hardness, investing in soft attack usually works out better. More firepower means you win battles faster, the enemy has less time to attack, and you end up taking less damage overall. And here comes the problem. In the algorithm, soft attack, breakthrough, and defense were treated as equally expensive. 10 points of soft attack cost the same as 10 points of defense. But in the actual game, soft attack is way harder to come by, and since the algorithm doesn't know that, it had an easy choice to make. Armor and piercing were honestly not that interesting. Most divisions ended up with exactly 50 piercing, just enough to match the highest armor value in the test pool. The armor values fell into two groups, around 40 and around 65. The 65 again matched the highest piercing division in the pool, while 40 was enough to not get pierced by almost everything else. Now that we've gone through the results, the next step is actually pretty simple. Figuring out the weights. Let's start with the 30 width template. I had a bunch of results from the algorithm for a budget of 800, 1000 and 1200 total points. For each budget, I calculated the average value for every stat, then turned those into percentages. Those percentages basically became the weights, showing how important each stat was compared to the others. Then I took all three sets of weights and averaged them together into one final set for the 30 width template. I did the exact same thing for the 18 width template and ended up with two sets of weights. With the weights finally figured out, I could move on to step 2, ranking every battalion in the game. For that, I first needed a list of each battalion's realistic stats. And since those can vary a lot depending on your doctrine and modifiers, I had to find a way to include all of that. And well, after doing so many complicated things already, I decided to keep this part simple and just do it by hand. So I just added one battalion at a time to a template, noted down their stats across all doctrine paths, and then added an extra modifier specific to certain battalions like general traits or high command. Once all of that was written down on a big spreadsheet, I was set up for applying the weights. And that works by, well, just applying the weights. Just like with the soccer players in the beginning, I multiplied each battalion's stats with their weights to get a combat effectiveness score. Since I also had the cost written down, I added another score for cost efficiency. Then I marked the battalions with the highest score across all doctrines. These would be the base for building the best division. The results for the support companies were crystal clear. The land cruiser absolutely crushed everything else. I mean, come on, just look at these stats, and it's even cheaper than a single mechanized battalion. It completely blew out the competition in both combat power and cost efficiency. Place 2 and 3 in the combat score ranking were the self-propelled super heavy artillery and the normal support artillery. But looking at cost efficiency, the next two were actually support artillery and rocket artillery. Unfortunately, I had no real way to measure the special effects of some companies. But honestly, flame tanks and the logistics company are often kind of mandatory anyway, so I decided I'd include them in every template. For infantry, I only really had two contenders, Mountaineers and M-Tracks, with Mountaineers being the most cost-efficient option, becoming the best normal special forces unit after you unlock the doctrine that reduces their combat width. M-Tracks, on the other hand, have the edge in raw combat score. They are way better than mechanized if you can get a commando advisor. Choosing tanks was easy again. The heavy tank had the highest combat score and was even the most cost efficient. And I know what some of you are thinking. Where's line artillery? Isn't it the best soft attack per cost? Yeah, it technically is, but there's also a problem. It only gives soft attack and nothing else. It's trash in any other stat beside it. Plus, line artillery has an atrocious 3 combat width, so it gives less soft attack than you think. If you want to invest in soft attack, just use tanks. I did the math. Compared to line artillery, heavy tanks give you 135% more soft attack per width. Also, why would you ever add line artillery to, for example, a Mountaineer division? I mean, okay, you get 100 extra soft attack, but you tank in all other stats and modifiers too. I'm talking about modifiers because all of these apply depending on your division's composition. And that's not even mentioning the terrain modifiers. Lower HP means that strength drops faster, which leads to higher equipment and manpower losses. Lower organization means the division can't fight as long, and a lower recovery rate makes it regain orc more slowly. And it even needs more supply, it's just overall worse. And for those that still have a shred of doubt in their mind, I ran both divisions side by side and well, the results speak for themselves. But enough with the rant, let's move on. Because the assembling part still wasn't clear, I did not know where to draw the line between raw combat effectiveness and cost efficiency. At least one thing was obvious. The template needs some amount of organization. So even though heavy tanks have the highest combat score, we can't just fill an entire template with them and call it a day. We need some infantry as well. So I decided to make 4 templates ranging from no tanks to a lot of tanks and let them duke it out. The cheap template consists only of Mountaineers with the most cost efficient support companies. The medium cheap template is a Space Marine, adding 1 or 2 tanks depending on width, while using the support companies with the highest combat scores. The medium expensive template is a basic tank template that uses Mountaineers as infantry, while the expensive one swaps those out for M-Tracks. With this setup ready, I still needed to figure out which doctrine fits each template the best. To do this, I added together the scores of all parts used in each template. And now, to all my superior firepower lovers, as it turns out, the best doctrine really is superior firepower. For the cheaper templates, the right-right branch had the highest score, while for the expensive ones, it was the right-left branch. But hold your horses before you go around telling everyone superior firepower is the best doctrine. There's a catch. As you've seen, land cruisers are completely broken. They have by far the highest combat score. And here's the thing, superior firepower increases the soft attack of support companies by 50%. That's an insane boost, especially when one of those support companies is completely busted in the first place. And here comes the problem. You can only unlock the land cruisers in the late game. If we remove it from the equation, you'll see that Grand Battle Plan Left becomes the best doctrine almost always. Still, since I included a land cruiser in my calculations, we'll go with superior firepower. But keep in mind that until you unlock them, Grand Battle Plan is technically the better choice. Great, now all I had to do was build all 4 templates in-game, pick the right doctrines and test them. I started battles, noted down all their stats and ran everything through the algorithm one last time. So, after all this time, let me present to you the best template in Hearts of Iron 4 single player. I somehow managed to avoid talking about this until now, but I often see people asking what's the best option with no DLCs. And since I see you guys, I also have 2 templates for you. Thing is, Without DLCs, it's even harder to get a lot of soft attack. Tanks alone don't provide much of it. So in this case, I would actually go with heavy SPGs. The first template uses 13 special forces and 2 heavy SPGs for a total of 30 width. Honestly, the breakthrough is still a bit too low for my taste. I guess you could add 2 medium tanks, but is the research really worth it? If you don't like this one, you can go the numbers route. Mass mob is actually a valid strategy. Maybe even better than the first one. Especially since without DLCs, regular infantry is only slightly worse than special forces. Once you get the reduced combat width, you've got the best infantry there is. Just slap soft attack, a tank and logistics on it. And you're ready to battle plan your way across the map. And since you'll also need a lot of XP to get the doctrine, make sure to hire your chief of army early and send attachés and volunteers to early wars. Honestly, I could end the video here, but there's still something I want to talk about. My own opinion and a few tips to make these templates work. Let's start with the templates. Personally, I probably use Space Marines most of the time. They're easy to make and more than enough for single player. I would still tweak a few things though. First off, the self-propelled super heavy artillery. Besides that I want to curse the guy who named it like that, it's only slightly better than rocket artillery. I'd swap it out. You'll save fuel and can do other special projects. Next up are the land cruisers. While they're really strong, I don't like them. I mean, look at this research time. Even if you start on day 1, you'll unlock them around 43 or 44 and then it takes another year to actually produce enough of them. Also, they might be cheap because you only need 1 of them per division, but that's also their weakness. If it gets destroyed in combat or lost due to reliability, your entire division suddenly becomes way weaker. But hey, if you want to go for funny big numbers, I won't judge. So let me share a few tips. Land cruisers take an ungodly amount of resources to build, so you have to conversion produce. For that, you need your final tank design and another decommissioned version where you strip off everything that costs resources. Then produce a few lines of the decommissioned one and use another line to convert them into your final design. That way, you will save a ton of resources. Just make sure you also disable the decommissioned version in your template. You can also use the same trick to produce tanks early and just refit them later once you've researched a better gun. But always make sure that you have the conversion tech researched. And know that you can only refit tanks that share the same base chassis. But this is no problem. New ones pretty much only give more reliability. And reliability is only important if your division uses a lot of tanks, so for Space Marines it's honestly not that big of a deal. And even if you use a lot of tanks, as long as you avoid bad supply zones and rough terrain, your losses won't get too high. Now I have to be that cliché YouTuber telling you that this video took a lot of effort to make, so please like and subscribe. This was my first time doing a voiceover and editing something this long, so feel free to leave your critique in the comments.